heavy oak door of the chancellery's secure conference room clicked shut behind Volodymyr Zelensky. Berlin's late autumn rain drummed against the tall windows, blurring the view of the Spree River outside. Inside, the air carried a faint trace of polished wood and fresh printer paper from the briefing folders stacked on the long table. Olaf Scholz sat at the head, his face etched with the lines of too many late nights. He adjusted his glasses, glancing at the Ukrainian president who had flown in unannounced that morning. No entourage, just Zelensky and a single leather satchel. Scholz's advisors hovered near the walls, notebooks in hand, but the chancellor waved them back. This was to be direct. "Zelensky, you demanded this meeting on short notice," Scholz said, his voice steady but clipped. "Energy talks again. What's the urgency this time?" Zelensky placed his satchel on the table with a soft thud. He didn't sit. "Olaf, Ukraine's grid is at 40% capacity after the strikes. We're blacking out cities nightly. Your commitments, those $450 million in equipment, it's not arriving. Not fully." Scholz leaned forward, fingers interlacing. "We've delivered what we can. The coalition you announced last month with the Dutch and Norwegians. It's moving. But Berlin can't snap its fingers and rebuild your infrastructure overnight." A pause hung between them. Zelensky unzipped the satchel, pulling out a slim dossier. Pages rustled as he slid it across the polished surface. "This isn't about snaps. It's about ultimatums. Look at page 7. Our intelligence shows German firms, Siemens, Rheinmetall suppliers, diverting 15% of allocated turbines to domestic storage, hidden in the fine print of your export logs." Scholz's eyes narrowed. He flipped open the dossier, scanning the highlighted figures. Exports dated 3 weeks prior, routed through Baltic ports. The numbers stared back. 200 megawatts rerouted, enough to power Kyiv for a month. "This is speculation," he countered. "Our audits show full compliance. You're accusing us of sabotage?" "Not sabotage." Zelensky's tone sharpened. "Self-preservation. Russia's gas leverage. Nord Stream's ghost still haunts you. If Ukraine folds on energy, Berlin buys time with Moscow. But we won't. Deliver the full package by December 1st, or we go public. Every EU summit, every NATO call, I expose the diversions." The room tightened. One advisor shifted in his chair, the leather creaking. Scholz exhaled slowly, closing the dossier. Outside, thunder rolled low over the city. "You threaten alliance? After all we've given? 25 billion total aid?" Zelensky met his gaze. "Alliance demands action, not words. We've lost 12 substations this season. Your delays cost lives. If you back down now, Olaf, it's not weakness. It's survival for both." Scholz stood, pacing to the window. Rain streaked the glass like tears. He turned, voice low. "A week. I'll review this with my cabinet." "But if it's a bluff?" "It's not." Zelensky gathered his papers. "Check the logs yourself. The truth is there." 2 days passed. In Kyiv, Zelensky's office buzzed with encrypted calls. Advisors pored over satellite feeds of German warehouses, confirming the turbine stacks under tarps. The ultimatum leaked subtly, an anonymous tip to Reuters about energy aid shortfalls. Berlin's phones rang off the hook. Scholz reconvened his inner circle in the same room, the rain now a steady patter. The dossier lay open, annotated in red ink. "He's right on the diversions," the economics minister admitted. 15% held back for winter reserves. Legal, but optics are deadly. Scholz rubbed his temple. "He wins this round. We look weak to Paris and London. But if we stonewall, Ukraine escalates. Public clash could fracture the coalition." The minister nodded. "Push back with numbers. Offer a partial shipment. Half now, rest in January. Buy time." "No." Scholz straightened. "Full delivery, but we tie it to concessions. No more leaks." By week's end, trucks rolled from Hamburg ports toward Ukraine's borders. Zelensky watched the convoy reports on his secure tablet, a grim smile forming. Victory, but Pyrrhic. Berlin had bent, yet whispers reached him. Scholz's team digging into Ukraine's own energy deals, probing for leverage. In a dimly lit Berlin cafe, far from the chancellery's gaze, a German diplomat met a shadowy contact. "The turbines move tomorrow," he murmured over black coffee. "But Scholz wants dirt. Find it on Zelensky's back-channel talks with the Americans." The contact nodded, slipping a thumb drive across the table. "We have something. But it could burn everyone." A week later, in the fortified corridors of Ukraine's presidential administration in Kyiv, Volodymyr Zelensky reviewed the shipment manifests on a secure terminal. The screens glowed under harsh fluorescent lights, casting shadows on stacks of unread cables. Outside, a light snow dusted the streets, muting the distant hum of generators. The turbines had crossed the border 2 days prior, full load as promised, but the accompanying paperwork raised flags. Berlin's clause demanding veto rights on Ukraine's resale of any excess power to non-EU neighbors. Zelensky tapped the screen, zooming on the fine print. It smelled of control, not aid. His chief of staff, Andriy Yermak, entered with a steaming mug of tea. Steam curled upward, cutting the chill from the drafty window seals. "The trucks are unloading in Lviv now," Yermak said. "But this veto, it's Scholz's way of keeping a leash. If we sign off, we lose leverage on the next phase. Those 300 million in grid reinforcements." Zelensky nodded, leaning back in his chair. The wood creaked under his weight. They bent on delivery. Now they push back on terms. "Call Berlin. I want Scholz on the line." The connection patched through within the hour. Zelensky's office fell silent save for the faint tick of a wall clock. He activated the speaker, Yermak standing rigid nearby. "Olaf," Zelensky began, voice even. "The hardware arrives. Good. But this clause, veto on exports, it's not partnership. It's a trap." Scholz's reply crackled from the line, his tone measured from the other end in Bonn. "Volodymyr, it's protection. Your grid feeds Poland now, but what if it loops to Belarus? We can't risk Russian proxies siphoning our investment. Sign it, and the funds flow." Yermak scribbled notes, his pen scratching paper. Zelensky glanced at him, then pressed on. "Protection for whom? We've rerouted 80% of our southern lines to EU specs already. Your veto blocks deals with Ankara, deals that bring in $150 million for repairs. If you say security, I say strings." A pause stretched. Scholz cleared his throat. "Adjust the clause. Limit it to 6 months. But we need assurances. Our intel picked up your talks with Washington. Off-book energy swaps for US drones. Share the details or the veto stays." Zelensky's jaw tightened. The line hummed. Yermak's eyes widened. He hadn't briefed on those channels. "Assurances?" Zelensky echoed. "You deliver aid with one hand, probe with the other. That's not alliance. Drop the veto, or I briefed NATO myself on your diversions last month." Scholz hesitated. 1 week. My team redrafts. But Volodymyr, don't push too far." The call ended. Zelensky stared at the dead screen. Yermak exhaled, setting down his pen. "They know about the US side channel." "How?" "Leaks," Zelensky muttered. "From that cafe meet in Berlin. We trace it or it bites us." 3 days passed. In a nondescript government annex in Berlin, Scholz met his foreign minister, Annalena Baerbock, behind frosted glass doors. The room smelled of fresh varnish from recent renovations, air thick with the whir of a new ventilation system. Folders lay scattered on a low table, one marked Kyiv Exchanges. Baerbock flipped through satellite photos. U.S. cargo planes landing in western Ukraine. Timestamps from 10 days prior. "Zelensky's bluffing on the veto," she said. "But these swaps, 50 million of American panels for intelligence on Russian movements. If it leaks wider, Paris pulls funding." Scholz paced the narrow space, hands clasped. "We redraft tomorrow. No veto, but we demand transparency on the drones. It's leverage for the next tranche." Baerbock nodded. "Agreed. Yet if he goes public, our coalition fractures. The Greens can't defend endless aid without controls." By the end of the week, the revised terms arrived via encrypted diplomatic pouch. No veto, but a joint oversight committee. Zelensky signed off in a late-night session, the snow now piling against the windows. Relief washed the room. But Yermak lingered. "We won the terms," he said, "but Berlin's digging deeper. That thumb drive from the contact, it's circulating in their intel circles." Zelensky looked up, the weight settling. "Then we counter. Pull in the Americans. Make sure our secrets stay buried." Across the Atlantic, in a shadowed DC briefing room, a State Department analyst received the urgent cable from Kyiv. Files on German probes stacked high, but one detail caught her eye. Coordinates for a new energy depot, ripe for exposure. As she forwarded it upward, the door opened. Her superior entered, face grim. "Zelensky's escalating. If Scholz finds the full swap logs, it ends everything. 2 weeks had elapsed since the revised aid terms cleared. In the marbled halls of the Bundestag, Olaf Scholz addressed a closed session of the Foreign Affairs Committee, the air crisp with the scent of aged leather from the high-backed chairs. MPs leaned forward as projectors hummed to life, casting blue light on charts of energy flows. Annalena Baerbock stood at the podium, her voice slicing the murmurs. "The leaks from Kyiv confirm it," she said, tapping a remote. The screen filled with redacted emails, timestamps from mid-October detailing Ukraine's barters, solar arrays for drone tech with Washington. Zelensky traded 40 megawatts of U.S. panels for real-time intel on Black Sea routes. No EU oversight. This breaches our joint protocols. Scholz nodded from his seat, fingers drumming the armrest. It's exposed now. Der Spiegel runs the story tomorrow. We demand a full audit of their grid allocations, or we freeze the next $200 million tranche. The committee chair, a stern Bavarian, cleared his throat. Public fallout. The Greens face backlash for blind aid. If Moscow spins this as NATO provocation... Exactly, Baerbock cut in. We reveal it strategically. Force transparency. Ukraine's ultimatum game ends here. Across the continent, in Kyiv's Bankova Street offices, Volodymyr Zelensky watched the encrypted alert ping his tablet. Rain lashed the bulletproof glass, turning the world outside to gray streaks. Andriy Yermak burst in, coat dripping, waving a printout. "Berlin's tipping it to the press," Yermak said, slamming the paper down. "Our U.S. swaps. Headlines by dawn. They timed it after the turbines landed. Retaliation." Zelensky scanned the draft article, his face hardening. They probe, we expose, pull the files on their Nord Stream ties, the ones showing German firms hedging bets with Gazprom, $50 million in side contracts last year, masked as maintenance. Yermak hesitated, then nodded. Risky. It drags in Brussels. But if we leak first, do it. Zelensky stood, pacing the worn carpet, anonymously to Politico. Balance the scales. The story broke at midnight Berlin time. Der Spiegel's front page screamed of Kyiv's secret energy deals with America, quoting anonymous sources on the swap's scale. Enough power to shield 3 frontline cities, traded for surveillance gear. Social media ignited. Hashtags trended from Munich to Warsaw. Elites in Brussels coffee shops whispering of fractured trust. By morning, protests swelled outside the chancellery. A crowd of 500, mostly students and aid workers, chanted against endless giveaways. Scholz's phone buzzed nonstop. Macron's office demanded clarification. In a hurried video link from his Kyiv bunker, Zelensky convened his energy minister, Herman Halushchenko. The connection flickered under power fluctuations. The swaps saved lives, Zelensky insisted. Drones spotted Russian missile launches, prevented blackouts for 200,000 in Kharkiv. Halushchenko gripped his notes. Berlin's audit call? It uncovers our vulnerabilities. Substations down 25% since summer. If they pull funding, then we counter public. Zelensky's eyes gleamed. Release the Gazprom docs. Show their hypocrisy. Hours later, Politico dropped the bomb. Germany's hidden gas deals amid Ukraine aid. Figures leaped out. 50 million funneled through shell firms, dated just before the turbine's diversion. Victims named: Ukrainian villages iced through last winter, 15,000 without heat due to delayed supplies. Berlin reeled. Baerbock stormed into Scholz's office, the door banging against a coat rack. This is Zelensky's play. Our firms look like collaborators. The committee's furious, calls for resignations. Scholz stared at the screen, sweat beading on his brow. He reveals our edges. We hit back harder. Alert the EU Commission. Demand sanctions on their off-books. As dusk fell over Kyiv, Zelensky addressed a small war room, maps of pipelines glowing on walls. Yermak entered, face pale. Brussels is convening an emergency energy council. Von der Leyen wants both sides tomorrow. Zelensky exhaled, the room's single lamp casting long shadows. Good. Let them see the full board. In the EU headquarters' sterile briefing suite, Ursula von der Leyen reviewed the dueling leaks, her aides shuffling printouts. One file caught her, a deeper thread, tying the swaps to Russian intercepts. This escalates beyond energy, she murmured. If it goes nuclear, call in the Americans. A week later, in the vast, echoing chamber of the European Commission's Berlaymont building, Ursula von der Leyen presided over the Emergency Energy Council. Sunlight slanted through high windows, glinting off the polished brass railings. Delegates from 27 nations filled the tiered seats, briefcases stacked like fortifications. Von der Leyen adjusted her microphone, her voice carrying clear over the low hum of translators. The leaks from Berlin and Kyiv demand clarity. Ukraine's grid losses, 30% capacity since August. Germany's aid commitments, $22 billion pledged, but diversions noted. We audit now, or the fractures widen. Olaf Scholz sat midway down, flanked by Annalena Baerbock. He shifted in his seat, the fabric whispering against the wood. Baerbock leaned in, murmuring. Push the sanctions angle. Their U.S. swaps bypassed us. Frame it as risk to collective security. Across the aisle, Volodymyr Zelensky's envoy, Andriy Yermak, gripped a tablet. His delegation occupied a tight cluster, notes scribbled in haste. Yermak tapped the screen, pulling up victim reports. A Kharkiv hospital offline for 48 hours last month. 20 patients. Relocated in freezing rain. They reveal our deals, he whispered to the energy minister beside him. We show the human cost of their delays. The floor opened to statements. France's foreign minister rose first, accent sharp. Paris stands with Kyiv. But Berlin's Gazprom ties, those $50 million contracts, undermine trust. How many Ukrainian homes stayed dark because of it? Scholz stood, buttoning his jacket. Speculation. Our firms complied with sanctions. Ukraine's off-books barters with America, 40 megawatts for drones, escalated Russian strikes. We've lost 2 Baltic ports to retaliation flares. Murmurs rippled. Von der Leyen rapped her gavel, the sound cracking like ice. Facts, not accusations. Present the figures. Yermak took the podium, his tie slightly askew from the flight. He projected slides, timelines of aid shortfalls, red arrows marking diversions. 3 weeks ago, turbines held back. Result: Odessa blackout, 150,000 without power. Villages in Donetsk, 15,000 civilians faced sub-zero nights. Berlin's veto clause would have blocked our Turkish exports, costing $120 million in repairs. Baerbock countered from her seat, voice rising. And your swaps? U.S. panels shielded military sites, not civilians. We've evidence. Intercepts showing drone paths lit by that power. It draws fire to EU borders. The room tensed. A Polish delegate interjected. Warsaw's grid strains from Ukraine's overflows. If audits freeze funds, our factories idle. Von der Leyen nodded to her aides. Independent review. 3 weeks. No new tranches until resolved. As the session broke, Yermak cornered a Dutch commissioner in the corridor, marble floors echoing their steps. Amsterdam's neutral. Help us. Berlin's pushing sanctions. Your ports, ship our aid. The commissioner paused, glancing at passing aides. We see the numbers, but Russia's watching. 1 leak too far, and they hit pipelines. Back in Berlin that evening, Scholz retreated to his private study, the space cluttered with policy binders. A single desk lamp pooled yellow light, shadows dancing on the walls. Baerbock paced, phone to her ear. The council split. France and Poland lean Kyiv. We need leverage. Dig into those U.S. logs deeper. Scholz poured water from a crystal decanter, glass clinking. Von der Leyen's audit cuts both ways. If it exposes our hedges, coal reserves bought quiet from Moscow last winter, 200,000 tons, we're done. Baerbock hung up, face flushed. Intel has more. Zelensky's team met U.S. envoys in Warsaw last week, not just energy, talks on joint NATO basing in exchange for grid tech. Scholz froze, water spilling slightly. That pulls Washington in. Call the ambassador. We brief them first, or lose the board. 2 days passed. In Kyiv, Zelensky reviewed the council transcript in his secure office, frost etching the windows. Yermak entered carrying a sealed envelope. The Dutch commissioner slipped this. Audit prelims. Berlin's contracts with Gazprom. Shells, dated post-invasion. Victims, 5,000 in Luhansk without heat. 2 deaths from exposure. Zelensky slit the seal, scanning the pages. They reveal, we reveal back. But the U.S. angle? If Scholz tips them? A knock interrupted. An aide rushed in, breathless. Leak alert. Reuters has the Warsaw meet. Anonymous. Berlin's mark. Zelensky's fist tightened on the paper. Counter it. Pull French allies. Make the audit our weapon. By midweek, Brussels buzzed with side meetings. Von der Leyen met Macron privately in a side room, velvet curtains drawn. The standoff bleeds us all, she said. Zelensky demands full aid flow. Scholz wants controls. but a new player, London, signaling interest in Ukraine's renewables. If they cut in, Macron steepled his fingers. Then we mediate, or watch the alliance crack. In a London embassy annex, the British Foreign Secretary reviewed cables, tea steaming untouched. One detail stood out: coordinates for a Ukrainian solar farm, funded quietly by UK firms. If Berlin blocks it, he murmured to his deputy, we go public. Zelensky's win becomes ours. 3 weeks into the audit standoff, the Foreign Office's oak-paneled conference room in London hummed with restrained urgency. Rain pattered against leaded windows overlooking the Thames, but inside, the air stirred from a quietly whirring fan. Keir Starmer sat at the oval table's head, reviewing printouts of the Brussels transcripts, his pen circling key figures. David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, stood by a world map pinned to the wall, marker in hand. He drew a line from Berlin to Kyiv. The EU's dragging. Von der Leyen's review could stall our $150 million renewables pledge. Zelensky's leaks expose German hedges, but Scholz counters with sanctions threats on Ukrainian exports. Starmer set down the pen, the click echoing. We step in. Our 100-year pact commits us. Back Kyiv publicly, offer joint oversight on their solar farms. It boxes Berlin without direct clash. Lammy nodded, capping the marker. Risks NATO ripples. If Scholz pulls the alarm, Russian proxies hit our shipments. But it shifts the board. Zelensky needs this. His grid's at 35% without it. Across the channel, in a Brussels hotel suite repurposed for diplomacy, Volodymyr Zelensky met Andriy Yermak and a British envoy under dim table lamps. The room overlooked the Grand Place. Cobblestones slick below. Zelensky poured tea from a silver pot, steam rising in thin wisps. The audit uncovers everything, Zelensky said, handing a cup. Berlin's Gazprom ties. $50 million masked as parts. We push, but von der Leyen hesitates. Your London's word carries weight. The envoy, a sharp-suited woman named Claire, accepted the cup without sipping. Prime Minister Starmer proposes a tripartite. UK, Ukraine, EU on energy flows. No vetoes. But Scholz demands your US swap logs first. Full disclosure, or he blocks the next aid wave. Yermak leaned forward, elbows on the table. Disclosure? Their diversions cost 200,000 homes last winter. If you say balance, we say exposure. Share the proposal. Force his hand. Zelensky's eyes narrowed. One condition. UK guarantees the solar sites. 3 farms in the west, 100 megawatts total. Russian strikes hit 2 already. Your tech shields them. Claire paused, then typed a note on her tablet. Agreed, provisional. But intel shares both ways. We've intercepts. German diplomats pressing Warsaw for your drone paths. The meeting stretched into the night. Zelensky paced the carpet, worn from countless feet. Scholz threatens sanctions. If London backs us, he folds, or escalates to NATO. By dawn, the tripartite draft circulated via secure channels. Starmer announced it from Downing Street, cameras flashing outside. UK stands with Ukraine's resilience. Joint oversight ensures aid flows unchecked. $300 million committed. Renewables first. Berlin erupted. In the Chancellery's strategy room, lined with digital screens flickering pipeline maps, Olaf Scholz slammed a folder down. Annalena Baerbock stood rigid, arms crossed. The space smelled of fresh coffee from a side machine, but no one touched it. London undercuts us, Scholz growled. Their pact pulls Ukraine closer. Our audit becomes a sideshow. Sanctions now. Freeze $100 million on those solar exports until logs surface. Baerbock shook her head. It fractures the EU. France balks, Poland gains from UK tech. Better, backroom with von der Leyen. Demand intelligence review. Our BND has threads. Zelensky's Warsaw meet tied to US basing talks. Scholz rubbed his chin, screens reflecting in his glasses. Do it, and alert NATO's Jens Stoltenberg. Frame it as security breach. Drones powered by aid, drawing fire to borders. 2 days later, in a NATO corridor in Brussels, Stoltenberg convened an urgent huddle. Zelensky's advisor arrived flustered, coat unbuttoned. This is Scholz's ploy, the advisor argued, waving a tablet. Their sanctions hit civilians. Khersen's farms offline, 10,000 workers idled. Stoltenberg, tall and composed, folded his hands. Alliance demands proof. Share the logs or the review expands. UK's in. But no one vetoes unity. Back in Kyiv, Zelensky received the NATO cable in his bunker, walls reinforced with steel plates. Yermak burst in, face taut. Stoltenberg's neutral, but Berlin's pushing. Sanctions draft circulates, blocks our Turkish deals, $80 million lost. Zelensky stood, knocking over a water glass. It shattered on the tile. Counter with London, activate the pact, joint statement, but if NATO digs our US ties, a secure line buzzed. Claire from the embassy. We're drafting the pushback, but intel leak. German agents tailed your Warsaw team. They have photos. Zelensky gripped the phone. Photos. Then we expose the tale. Pull French media. Make it their scandal. By week's end, Le Monde ran the story. Berlin shadows, Kyiv envoys. Protests swelled in Warsaw, 1,000 marching against EU spies. Scholz's approval dipped, polls showing 15% drop. In a shadowed Vienna safehouse, a BND operative met a Russian contact, envelope exchanged under a bare bulb. The photos buy time, the operative whispered. But Zelensky's turning UK against us. Next, hit the farms. The contact pocketed it, vanishing into the night. Zelensky's line rang again, from Stoltenberg. The review accelerates. Come to Brussels, or lose the alliance. 2 weeks after NATO's summons, the alliance's Brussels headquarters thrummed with closed-door tension. Jens Stoltenberg led the Energy Security Subcommittee in a windowless briefing room, walls lined with digital maps pulsing red over Black Sea routes. The air hummed from overhead vents, carrying a faint metallic tang. Stoltenberg adjusted his notes, voice steady. The audit expands. Ukraine's U.S. swaps, 40 megawatts for drones, risked escalation. Berlin reports intercepts. Russian jets diverted after those flights. We need full logs or aid coordination halts. Olaf Scholz's representative, a wiry BND liaison named Klaus, sat forward. He slid a tablet across the table. Here's partial evidence. Warsaw meet photos. Zelensky's team with U.S. operatives. Timestamps matching a drone surge. It drew fire to our Polish borders. Murmurs rose. Volodymyr Zelensky joined via secure video from Kyiv, his feed flickering under backup power. Andriy Yermak stood beside him, arms crossed. Photos prove nothing, Zelensky said. Your agents tailed us. Le Monde exposed it. Berlin's sanctions already idled 5,000 in Kherson. Drop them or NATO looks complicit. Stoltenberg raised a hand. Neutral ground. Share logs mutually. Germany's Gazprom files first. 50 million details. 3 days. The line cut. In Berlin's intelligence annex, Klaus met Annalena Baerbock under stark fluorescence. Files stacked high on steel shelves. Baerbock tapped a dossier. We hold the photos, but Zelensky counters with UK pressure. Starmer's tripartite pulls France. Leak the full intercepts to Reuters. Frame it as Ukrainian provocation. Klaus nodded but hesitated. Risky. If they trace it to BND, resignations follow. Do it, Baerbock pressed. Stakes rise. No more half measures. By evening, Reuters broke the story. NATO alarmed by Ukraine's drone energy trades. Details emerged. 3 Russian strikes post-swap. 12 civilian sites hit, including a Lviv warehouse. Public outrage swelled. Berlin polls ticked up for Scholz, 8% gain overnight. In Kyiv's war room, Zelensky watched the broadcast on a wall screen, the glow harsh against concrete walls. Yermak paced, phone buzzing. Berlin's leak. NATO's leaning their way. Stoltenberg calls for sanctions review. Our exports to Turkey, $80 million, frozen pending. Zelensky gripped the table edge. They weaponize intel. Pull the EU files. Von der Leyen's office. Show their hedges. 200,000 tons coal from Moscow shells. Time to our blackouts. Yermak dialed, voice low. Done. But London warns. Starmer's holding the pact, but if NATO cuts coordination, a aide interrupted, handing a cable. From Brussels, audit team arrives tomorrow. Unannounced search of our energy ministry records. Zelensky exhaled sharply. Ambush. Prep the vaults. Hide the US logs. Dawn broke cold. The EU audit team, led by a stern Dutch inspector, swept into Kyiv's energy ministry. Guards flanked them through echoing halls, boots clicking on marble. They seized servers in the sublevel, dust motes dancing in flashlight beams. Herman Halushchenko, the minister, confronted them in the lobby. This violates sovereignty. Berlin tipped you, targeted after their leak. The inspector, unmoved, sealed a box. Protocol, logs, or obstruction charges, 2 hours. Back in the presidential bunker, Zelensky monitored via feed. Yermak burst in, sweat on his brow. They found traces. Encrypted US transfers, if decoded, Zelensky stood. Evacuate the sensitive drives. Call Starmer direct. Pull UK veto on the search. The line connected mid-morning. Starmer's voice crackled from London. We're intervening. Tripartite clause blocks unilateral raids. But Zelensky, disclose partial logs. Buy time. Partial? Zelensky echoed. Their coal buys killed 2,000 in our east last winter. No deals. Starmer paused. Then NATO votes tomorrow. Aid flow hangs. By afternoon, the team withdrew. UK pressure halted the full raid, but with 20% of records copied. Zelensky addressed his cabinet in the bunker. Maps rolled out. We hold. Leak the coal manifest to BBC. Turn their gain. Yermak nodded. BBC confirms 200,000 tons traced, but Stoltenberg's vote. Berlin lobbies hard. Night fell. In a NATO side office, Stoltenberg reviewed the dueling files alone, lamp casting shadows on his desk. One cable stood out, a deeper intercept hinting at German agents in Vienna, coordinating with shadows. He forwarded it upward, brow furrowed. If true, this implicates Berlin. Call an emergency summit. Across the ocean, a U.S. State Department alert pinged. European rift deepens. Zelensky requests direct line. Energy swaps at risk. 1 week following the NATO cable's revelation, the alliance's emergency summit convened in a fortified wing of Brussels headquarters, floodlights piercing the night outside. Jens Stoltenberg opened the secure chamber, its curved walls embedded with screens displaying live feeds from member capitals. The air circulated cool and filtered, underscoring the gravity. Stoltenberg stood at the central podium, his tie loosened slightly. Intercepts confirm irregularities. German agents in Vienna, coordinating shadows on Ukrainian envoys. This breaches alliance protocols. Aid coordination demands transparency, or we risk fracture. Olaf Scholz arrived mid-session, jet-lagged but composed, taking his seat amid murmurs. Annalena Baerbock flanked him, her notes crisp. Scholz addressed the room, voice resonant. Speculation. Our BND monitored threats. Russian. Proxies, not Kyiv. Zelensky's U.S. swaps provoked strikes. 3 farms hit last month, 10,000 acres scorched. Sanctions pending unless logs shared. Across the table, Volodymyr Zelensky sat in person for the first time, his delegation compact. Andriy Yermak whispered updates. Zelensky rose, gripping the edge. Monitored, tailed. Your Vienna op exposed in media. Warsaw protests 2,000 strong. Drop sanctions or we detail the coal buys. 200,000 tons from shells, fueling our blackouts. Stoltenberg interjected. Evidence tabled. UK's Starmer joins remotely. The screen flickered. Keir Starmer appeared from London, backdrop a Union Jack. Tripartite holds. Berlin's actions undermine. Our 150 million flows to Kyiv unchecked. NATO unity over vendettas. Tension coiled. Baerbock leaned to Scholz. Push the US angle. Their drones. 50 units traded. Escalated Black Sea fire. Von der Leyen's audit backs us. Scholz nodded, then spoke. America's in deep. Zelensky's Warsaw talks. Basing rights for grid tech. If Russia retaliates, NATO borders burn. Freeze $100 million now. The room stirred. A French delegate objected. Paris vetoes. Ukraine's losses. 30% grid down. Your hedges cost lives. Kherson idled. Factories silent. Zelensky countered sharply. You say borders. I say survival. Share your Vienna files. Olaf. Or NATO sees the full chain. Stoltenberg called recess. In a side alcove, Scholz met Baerbock under dim sconces. He's cornering us. Leak the basing proposal to CNN. Turn Washington against him. Baerbock hesitated. It pulls Biden in. But yes, stakes demand it. 2 days later, CNN aired the scoop. Ukraine eyes U.S. bases in energy deal. Details trickled. 3 sites proposed, tied to 40 megawatt swaps. U.S. State Department denied, but cables leaked. Antony Blinken urging discretion. In Kyiv's presidential suite, Zelensky watched the broadcast, frost rimming the outer panes. Yermak entered, tablet in hand. Berlin's leak. Biden's office furious. Presses for our logs. NATO vote tomorrow. Sanctions or release. Zelensky paced the Persian rug. They escalate. Call Blinken. Assure partial shares, but demand UK blockade on their Vienna probe. The line connected. Blinken's voice measured from foggy bottom. Volodymyr, basing talks complicate. Share the drone paths, avoids NATO split, or Scholz wins the freeze. Complicate? Zelensky echoed. Their agents drew Russian fire to Lviv. 2 sites razed, no shares without reciprocity. Blicken paused. Agreed, provisional. But if vote passes, your aid dries. By evening, von der Leyen arrived unannounced in Brussels, her motorcade slicing fog. She joined Stoltenberg in his office. Maps rolled across the desk. The summit's tipping. Scholz lobbies east. Poland wavers. Intervene or energy pact crumbles. Stoltenberg steepled fingers. One more play. Joint probe. Vienna files for U.S. logs. Unity holds. Von der Leyen nodded. Drafted. But Zelensky resists. His UK's shield grows. 3 days passed. The NATO vote loomed. In a Berlin war room, screens tracked polls. Scholz's support rebounding 10%, but EU fractures showed. France threatening veto. Scholz reviewed the draft probe with Baerbock. They fold if we hold. But the Vienna contact? Compromised? Baerbock paled. Lost signal. If exposed? An aide burst in. Leak. BBC has our coal manifests. Zelensky's counter. Victims named. 2,000 in East. Scholz's face drained. Pull back, or the vote buries us. In the summit chamber, as delegates reconvened, Yermak slipped Zelensky a note. Blinken confirms, U.S. backs probe, for now. Zelensky glanced up, meeting Scholz's gaze across the room. The gavel fell. Vote proceeds, but a new intercept, Russian buildup near borders, tied to our rift. Stoltenberg leaned in. If sanctions pass, escalation follows. Choose wisely. As ballots circulated, a secure door opened. A U.S. envoy entered, envelope in hand. From Blinken. Game changer. For one side. The NATO summit chamber fell silent as the U.S. envoy, a lean operative from Blinken's team, handed the sealed envelope to Stoltenberg. Delegates craned necks. The rustle of papers the only sound amid the hum of cooling systems. Stoltenberg slid it open, his face unreadable under the overhead lights. From Washington, he announced, voice cutting the tension. Full intercepts on Vienna, German agents coordinating with non-state actors, not proxies, freelancers tied to Gazprom shells. $50 million trail leads back to Berlin approvals. Scholz bolted upright, chair scraping tile. Baerbock's hand flew to her mouth. Fabrication, Scholz barked. BND denies. Zelensky's plant. His U.S. swaps hid worse. Zelensky remained seated, eyes locked on Scholz. Yermak leaned in, whispering. The room erupted in side talks. French and Polish reps demanded verification. Starmer's feed from London flickered. This tips it. Sanctions reversed. UK triples renewables pledged to $450 million. Stoltenberg rapped the podium. Probe launches immediately. Aid flows unrestricted. Ukraine's logs shared under joint seal. No more shadows. Scholz stood, face ashen. This fractures everything. He stormed out, Baerbock trailing, her heels echoing down the corridor. By midnight, Berlin's chancellery boiled. In the ops room, screens showed live feeds. Vienna safehouse raided. 2 agents in custody. Thumb drives seized. Baerbock confronted Scholz behind a locked door, the space tight with the scent of stale air from sealed vents. You approved the freelancers, she accused, voice low. To probe without traces. Now it's treason optics. Gazprom ties exposed. Resign or the coalition dissolves. Scholz slumped into a chair, loosening his tie. For leverage. Zelensky's ultimatums forced it. If I go. You go. Baerbock turned, door clicking shut. Dawn broke with her presser. Chancellor stepping back. Audit clears path for transparent aid. News rippled. In Kyiv, Zelensky watched from his office. Snow, melting on the sills outside. Yermak entered bearing the NATO accord. Full $300 million tranche released. UK solar farms shielded under tripartite pact. Berlin bends. Von der Leyen endorses new rules. No diversions, joint oversight. Zelensky nodded, the weight lifting slightly. Wins cost. Their agents drew fire. Lviv's scars remain, but the grid holds. 2 weeks passed. EU reforms rolled out. Energy aid codified, veto clauses banned, transparency mandates for all members. Ukraine's exports to Turkey resumed, a $120 million inflow stabilizing blackouts for 150,000 homes. NATO's Energy Council reformed, with Kyiv observer status. First step to deeper ties. Scholz announced his resignation in a clipped Bundestag speech, the hall half empty. Personal accountability, he said, voice flat. Baerbock ascended interim, vowing clean slate. Polls shifted. Her approval surged 12%, but trust in Berlin's word eroded, whispers of French-led pivots. In London, Starmer sealed the 100-year pact expansion, envoys toasting in Downing Street under crystal chandeliers. Zelensky's stand reshapes us, he murmured to Lamy. No more half-allies. Zelensky back in Bankova reviewed the final manifests. Turbines humming in western stations, power steady at 65% capacity. Yermak lingered. Russia watches. Their strikes eased, but the board resets. Zelensky gazed out at the thawing streets. We changed the game. Power flows now, not just promises, but vigilance endures. Across the Atlantic, Blinken archived the file, a quiet victory. The standoff's end birthed a tighter web. EU, NATO, US, UK bound in energy steel. Ukraine stood taller, its grid a symbol. Resilience forged in clash, illuminating paths forward. Yet in shadowed Vienna alleys, a lone figure slipped away, phone buzzing with new orders. The game evolved, but threats lingered.